house she grew up in and lived in with her parents until after her college days was haunted by an older man who had a bad temper and didn't like being messed with, as well as a little girl who loved to play and be a kid, but was also tormented by the male spirit. I'm not sure if she was his daughter or what, but I'll get to them later. I met Jessica when she was in high school and I was in middle school, but we didn't actually start hanging out and becoming good friends until after she graduated and I was about to graduate high school. We shared a mutual friend, and because of him, I met her, and the three of us were inseparable for quite a few years after that. The two of them ran a theatre group in the small city we all grew up in, and after I graduated, I joined it and did a few plays with them. I had actually first met her when I was in middle school because of theatre. She was on the tech crew, and I wanted to be, so I hung out with them during a play to see what they all did, and she was in charge of showing me things. It was because of the theatre group she started that caused us to hang out at her house all the time. And since I was best friends with our mutual friend, whom she was also best friends with, I kind of became one of the main members of the group too. So we spent a lot of time rehearsing, talking about our next play, or designing sets. Spending all of that time there got her open to open up about ghosts, and her mom loved to tell me stories too. Apparently, there were so many stories from over the years that her mom started writing them all down on a file on her computer, with aspirations to write a book about it all one day. Some of the things Jessica or her mom told me that happened there. During high school and her affiliation with the drama club and theatre, a lot of people had been through her house, and a lot of them also got to hear the stories. So her house was well known for being haunted. During one cast party for one of the high school plays they did, a girl decided she didn't believe in the ghosts and began taunting them. Jessica informed me that they had discovered that to be a bad move years prior, so she tried taking the girl out of it. But the girl continued to walk through the house, talking trash to the ghosts. In one of the spare bedrooms that had been converted to a multi-purpose room on the first floor was a sewing machine. While in the room talking trash, the sewing machine began running, scaring the hell out of the two of them. What scared them more was when Jessica went to unplug it to get it to stop running, and discovered that it was already unplugged. The girl froze, turned pale white, and fled the house, never to return. Quite a few people witnessed this. I feel like the most activity happened to Jessica, and I think that's because she let it all get to her. Her dad didn't bother with any of it at all, and for all I know, didn't even believe in it. The mum loved it, and as I said, documented everything. She would tell me stories with a smile on her face. But Jessica was terrified of what went on, so I think that's why she was messed with all the time. That, and her bedroom was upstairs. It was the top floor of the house. What may have been an attic, maybe it was meant to be a room. It was finished and had its own bathroom. And honestly, it could have been two big bedrooms, but the entire floor was wide open. Jessica said they would lay in bed almost every night and hear footsteps all over her floor, walking around her bed, sometimes running back and forth. She would feel someone or something sit on the edge of her bed, but she would cower under the blankets and hope it went away. She actually developed a sleep habit where nothing could wake her. I guess she was just so scared of what she might see if she did wake up. I have stories of all three of us hanging out late into the night and trying to wake her up when it was time to go. Once, we laid her on her car hood and blew the horn for a solid minute. She wouldn't wake up. She also had a habit of sleeping and texting people nonsense messages. They were always fun. Both her and her mum told me a few times how they would all be downstairs during the day and hear someone running around above them, when clearly nobody was up there. The running always sounded like kids' feet, not an adult stomping around. One day I went over, as we had planned on hanging out that day. I can't remember what we were doing, probably just driving around. But when I went into her house to get her, She was busy looking around for her purse. Her and I were the only ones in the house. Both of her parents were at work. She looked back and forth every room. The whole time I stood by the front door waiting and watching her look. She told me she had looked in her room upstairs and everywhere else, and that she had just got home from her classes at college a short while before I stopped over, and she had her purse with her then. She knew she brought it in, and had doubts that she had even taken it upstairs. She stopped in front of the bottom of her stairs while walking from the kitchen towards me in the living room, which was supposed to have a door, but it had been removed years before to make the upstairs feel less closed in. While I was watching her stand there and think about where her purse could be, it flew down the stairs, hit her in the chest, and fell to the floor. The look on her face was priceless as she slowly looked back up the steps towards her room, pale as pale could be. I couldn't help it. I laughed. She quickly picked up her purse and shoved me out of the door. We didn't return until much later when she knew her parents would be home. Despite my experiencing that firsthand, I still think the best story of the home happened to Jessica alone, as she was the only one there. I talked to her immediately after it happened and knew she wasn't lying about it. She came home from her college, her parents were away at work, and she went into the bathroom. She said while she was using the facilities, all of a sudden there was crying in the house, like a little girl upset about something. She said it grew in volume until it was coming from right on the other side of the bathroom door. Jessica freaked out and was afraid to leave the bathroom, but the crying wouldn't stop. Jessica, not thinking to ask if everything was okay or what was wrong, if I remember correctly, yelled to go away, but the crying continued. She finally got the nerve to leave and open the door, the crying never stopping. She ran from the bathroom to the kitchen and said the crying followed her. She quickly wrote a note to her parents about what was going on and why she was leaving, and she ran out of the house, crying following her until she was gone. So one night, the cast of the current play she was doing with her group was at her house all day and into the night, working on set pieces in the yard. About the time that everyone decided to leave, just myself, Jessica, and one of the cast members hung around. We cleaned up and went inside to have a seat in the living room. I'm not sure where the parents were, but we were the only three in the house. For whatever reason, we'd been talking about ghosts, and her house specifically. I think it was because the cast member with us believed in ghosts, and I pushed Jessica to tell the cast member about her house. One of the things people experienced there all the time was being spoken to when nobody else in the house could hear it. A lot of people had had that happen to them there, and as Jessica told us about how she would be in her room and hear her mom yell to her from the kitchen, only for her to go to the kitchen and ask what she wanted, to find out her mom never called to her. The other cast member said he heard a bang in the house that neither of us heard, and he said he had only heard it with one ear. So I decided to taunt the ghosts myself, since they responded to that sort of thing. I was ready. I started talking crap loudly, calling them out, and then it happened. Another loud bang, this time from the kitchen. We all heard it. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen to look around, and the only thing I could figure that made the noise was the empty glass on the kitchen table. The bang we heard sounded like it could have been that, but who slammed it down on the table? I walked into the centre of the kitchen, and that's where I felt the spirits. The feeling was intense, and to this day the most intense I have ever felt from a ghost. The longer I stood there, the more electrically charged my body felt. And I got a strong image in my head of who was standing there with me. It was the older man and the little girl. They were standing side by side, and he had his arm around the back of her head with his hand on her shoulder. I'm 5'10", but the man was easily 6 foot, and the top of the little girl's head only went up to his waist. He had short brown hair and was clean shaven, and wore blue jeans and a red flannel shirt. She had long black straight hair and wore a white nightgown. He appeared pissed, and I think his energy is what I was feeling mostly. She seemed scared, And I kind of got the vibe from them that maybe she wasn't his daughter, and that maybe he abused her in some way when they were living, or maybe he kidnapped her. I don't know. Maybe they didn't meet until the afterlife. I certainly hope they didn't die together. I also got the feeling that he was controlling, even in death, and that the little girl was scared of him. The energy was so strong that I had to leave it, or it would have passed out. I was just able to leave the kitchen on my own and felt as if I had been floating away. I couldn't feel myself walking, but I know I was because I was moving back to the living room. I saw everything through tunnel vision, and I was super excited that I just had that experience. The energy I felt from them, wow. Jessica said I was also pale white and looked like I was going to pass out. I remember talking to her and the cast member, I can't remember his name now, about what had just happened. And we all had to go outside so I could come back down to earth and tell them everything. Shortly after that, things went so bad that they had their priest come in and bless the house. Jessica was pissed because she still heard the running around upstairs after the blessing, and I had her tell me again what the priest had done during the blessing. He rid the home of all evil spirits. It must have worked, because he got rid of the man that had been there, but the little girl wasn't evil, and she was still there. Except she was happy, and played all the time, which was bad for my friend, because she had to hear her running around a lot more. They moved out a few years after that, and their new home isn't haunted, I don't think. She's never told me if it is. Maybe I'll reach out to her and ask about that book. Oh, I also found out something a short while after the blessing. Jessica's aunt and her large family lived just a few streets down in a house that looked just like hers. Most of those houses do, as they were all built at the same time. Their house is also haunted. I say is because they still live there and still experience things. And Jessica's cousin one day, shortly after the blessing of Jessica's house, said she saw a ghost in her house and described the man I saw in the kitchen to a T. Jessica couldn't believe it, as her cousin hadn't heard about my experience in the kitchen yet. Apparently, when he left Jessica's house, he somehow ended up there. For all I know, he's still there. She was the type of person that made everyone feel happy and alive. She made watching paint dry so much fun. I've been trying to wrap my head around things and make some sense out of the circumstances, but I haven't been able to. I was already raising her 2 children until she got on her feet. After 8 months, she was 3 days from coming home, but now that day will never come. A little over a week after she passed, I had a dream she was there. She was wearing her ripped jeans and scuffed up black and white Converse that she had propped on the bench she was kicking back on, like nothing ever happened. The moment I saw her, I jumped up and ran over, taking her little hands in mine. I could smell her hair as I was stroking it. She liked to make things with her hands, so they were soft, but her fingertips were a little rough and I felt them. This was so real. Ginny, oh my God, please listen to me. Listen to me. I was frantically telling her that she was gone. I can't tell you how intense this was. I was so desperate for her to believe me that it scared us both. I told her how she died and she looked as if she was trying to remember. And then it was like a light went on in her head and it clicked on how it might have happened. At that moment, a faded image of her brother standing in the background, cupping his face, crying, appeared at a glance and I saw fear in her eyes. She shook her head, no, and put off a vibration that this was a mistake, and she never thought this could happen, and it looked like she finally realised that she was no longer living. She asked me why I was telling her this now, because it was too late. Now, mind you, this was a dream. I told that if there was maybe a chance, maybe in a parallel or alternate time or dimension, and in that time you would have listened to me and not made the decision that killed you. I said that maybe if you believe me, I will wake up in that time or dimension, and you will be walking in my front door telling me that you love me, and all this pain really would be a bad dream. I woke up crying and heard my grandson's voice, who was lying on the bed next to me. He asked if I was crying about his mom. I told him that I just had a bad dream and that I was sorry for crying. He's autistic, so it was hard for him to comprehend at first. He sat up and stroked my face, wiping my tears, and told me, "Mom says she is sorry. She said to trust her because that man did it." My grandson was telling me this like he was just passing a message, and what he said all made sense. The day went on, and my son could definitely see that there was something more to me that day, so I told him about my dream. As I'm telling him, I noticed the blood drained from his face. I asked him what was wrong. He remembered 6 years before Ginny came to him with an, as she put it, really trippy and scary dream about Mom. She told him that I was acting crazy trying to convince her not to do something because it killed her, so she had to change things or she would die. She told him that it really shook her up because Mom, me, was so frantic and desperate for her to believe her that she was dead. She told him that it was so real that it scared her. I remember her telling me something, but she didn't go into details. She just said that she was sorry for whatever it was she did in her dream, and I remember laughing and telling her that maybe it was a sign not to do whatever it was she did. My son and I are at a loss for words on this, and I'm so confused. Is there an alternate or parallel universe? Are there different times and dimensions? Did she ever heed my warning? Did I save her in another dimension? And if so, how many times? It was so real for both of us 6 years apart. Why didn't she listen to me in his life and this time? I know, it was just a dream, but it was so real. I feel blessed to have heard her voice tell me that she loves me and that she's sorry. My son felt her hugs and saw her smiling at him in the workshop. I hear my grandson sometimes talk to her in the other room and it fills my heart. My daughter texts her, trying to pretend there is some sort of normality. She said that everyone mourns in their own way, and the one thing she misses the most is hearing her mother say her name. I think she's wise beyond her age. For my granddaughter's peace, I hope her mother visits her in some way. This happened around 13 years ago, near Elizabeth Lake in California. My kids and I were looking to buy a house. There wasn't a lot in my price range, but in those days, we just wanted a place to call our home. I remembered that it was a sunny day, but it wasn't too hot, so we got new listings from the realtor, and off we went. We had such high hopes, and everything was going pretty well, and we found a few hopefuls. But for some reason, when it came down to the last house that was located on a hill, the realtor told us that she wouldn't be going up there with us. I asked her how it would be getting in the house, and she told me for some reason that there was no point, so nobody ever locks it. Well, I didn't understand what she meant by that, and we all thought she started acting very strange at the end there. But after looking at the pictures of the place, we were excited to go look. The directions were simple. Go up this winding road passing two houses on the right, and up at the very top of the hill, overlooking an old, unused road, stood a large, white, two-storey house with black trim. It looked a bit tired and the yard was somewhat overgrown. We pulled into the driveway and sat there for a minute staring at the bright red front door. The house didn't look scary at first. All we saw was potential, so I went up to the door with my kids behind me, anxiously waiting to go exploring. You think from our history with the paranormal that I would feel something the second I touched the door handle, but I didn't. As you walk in, you're met by a staircase that went up to a landing, where it turned left and then they turned into open carpeted stairs that went up to the kitchen and living room on the second floor. To the left was a door to the garage, and to the right was a bedroom, and then 3 more bedrooms joined by a long hall that went straight back and a bathroom at the very end. I decided to look in the garage first to check the foundation and pipes, and that's when my daughter Ginny saw a little cross in the sill of the window. Then she noticed another one on the other window. Not thinking anything about it, she asked if she could keep them so she could make some earrings. I didn't see why not. After all, they were left behind. As I started up the open stairs, I felt dizzy, as if my world was upside down, and I almost fell over. Grabbing the rail, I sat down on the top step, and my son Cody came barreling up the stairs and stopped halfway up, and put his hand on his throat while making a face, and ran up the rest of the way. I felt better, so I looked around some more with them. There were large windows everywhere, and a door that opened to a balcony overlooking the cliff part of the back of the house, where we stood for a bit, taking in the beauty, but all of us got an uneasy feeling, so we went in to further check the place out. Cody was looking out the windows in the living room, where he kept picking things up, yelling at his sister that he found another one. My daughter started down the stairs, and she lost her footing, and I remember stating that if we got the place, we'd have to put in another handrail. I looked at the bedroom in the front, thinking that would be my room, but as we walked back, the darker and cooler the rooms were, which I mentioned would be great in the summer. I was looking in the bathroom when I got this cold chill go up through my spine and all my hair raised. It was an undoubtable feeling that I'd had many times before. I heard a breath next to me, and I knew that if I looked, I might see something. So I turned my head, deflecting my eyes with my hand, as I passed by the mirror as I walked out. And that's when my older son, who was in the back bedroom, pointed out that there was a cross over the window and door to the room. Cody then pulled some of the same small crosses out of his pocket and said that he thought Ginny wanted them, so he'd been picking them up for her. I ran to the cross over the window and then to the door and told them that these crosses are different from the ones in his pocket. These are painted over and were meant to stay. At that point, we were freaking out. We saw that over every opening, every window, on both sides of every doorway, there's a cross. Ginny made a good point. As much as we wanted to all run away, we had to put all of the crosses back where we found them. We went together from room to room to put every one of them that they took back. Then we started out the front door. Ginny and I were the last to step out the house. Ginny's words were, "Wow, it's warmer outside." And then I got pushed from the back, almost making me run into her. I asked the realtor why she would even show us the house, but apparently she had never been in the house herself. But you can bet after hearing what we had to say, she never did. We were talking about it later, and we all came up with the same conclusion. That house must have seen a lot of evil. We wonder how long they tormented before they realised that whatever was there must have been too strong for her faith. How bad does it have to be before you throw in the towel? They must have been really frightened for the owner to have painted over so many crosses. When we first moved into this house in Washington 3 years ago, we saw a few random orbs here and there. Nothing that felt harmful. In fact, one orb even danced to the music alongside my granddaughter one day, and it felt like a child. The house sits on acres of field, surrounded by forest and a few farms. For some reason, the guest room, laundry and bathroom are always freezing cold. Plus, cool air comes from the guest bedroom closet. I keep a blanket hanging up in the hall doorway to keep the cold isolated. I figure those rooms are just cold because they're added on and are half built over our well. I have my mother's ashes in my home, but at the same time, I felt bad because when I was asked if I wanted my sister's ashes later, it scared me for some reason. I don't know why. She was a very loving person, but for many years, I felt darkness around her, and I just couldn't. A year passed, and that fear left me. I remembered her telling me one day before she died that she had a recurring dream of her death, and she was stuck in the desert. It then dawned on me that her ashes were being cared for by my daughter, who lives in the desert. It was time to let her be with Mom. After she arrived, her ashes were placed next to our mother's ashes outside my room. And like my mother, she was surrounded by some of her mementos. At first, there wasn't a problem, but after time, that's when the kids started seeing and experiencing things that made them feel uncomfortable. It didn't feel like my sister. This was something else. Strangely, absolutely no one in the family has felt her presence since she passed. I know my kids looked towards me for assurance. I guess they thought that, like in other homes, I could just make it all go away. But I think this stayed hidden from me in the beginning and preyed on those who showed fear. So it was targeting my grown kids, that being my son and his fiancée. I feel bad. I kept telling my son that there was nothing here and that our house wasn't haunted because we cleansed it after my sister passed away. Cody, if you're reading this, I apologize for not wanting to believe you at the time. I was just trying to protect you and the kids from being scared. So these are a few things that have been happening in our home for the past few years. One late afternoon, I was at the store, so my son and fiancée were watching my 2 grandchildren for me. They were playing hide and seek, and they both took turns hiding from the kids in the guest room closets. They told me that something wasn't right there. Each of them experienced what they said felt like somebody or something taking up space with them in the closet, practically in their face. It's been a toy room in the beginning, but the kids wouldn't play in there. The only person who has slept in there with no problem is my ex on a visit. He was a non-believer until just the other day, when we were sitting in there watching a show together, and we observed his dog intently follow something, move around the room. Then the bathroom door opened. His dog watched whatever it was going into the bathroom, and the door shut behind it. At that point, his dog dove under his blanket. My ex's eyes were as big as saucers, and he asked me if I saw what he saw. Laughing inside at the former non-believer, I said yes. No one else was sleeping there, not even me. 6 months ago, my son told me that he went into the kitchen to grab something to drink the night before, and he saw a dark shadow over his left shoulder in his reflection on the microwave. He turned around quickly to look behind him. There was nothing there. He still felt something close to him, and the hair on his arm and neck raised. So when he looked in his reflection, this time in the window over the sink, and again, it was back with its head even closer to his. Then the cabinet door shook back and forth, then opened all the way and shut. He said that he yelled, not caring if he woke anyone up, and ran upstairs to his room. I don't blame him. Many times, he and his fiancée have seen big shadow masses in corners of various rooms, but never in my bedroom. Waiting outside my door where my sister's ashes are, but never inside my room. There was a time not too long ago when they were both sitting in my van talking one night, and they said the form of a man came out from behind the tree, crossed the grass, and sat with his hands in his lap on the front porch bench, then faded away. When they told me about the bathroom, oh my, that bathroom, I can't even. His fiancée was taking a bath after everyone went to sleep, so as not to disturb anyone. She was relaxing in our big old claw bathtub in the quiet of the night, and she heard us all sleeping, so she knew for a fact nobody was up. There was a tapping on the bathroom door. She answered, "Who is it?" No response. The doorknob started to jiggle, then stopped. She said again, "Who is it? I'm in the tub." Still no response. She thought that whoever it was decided to go to the other bathroom, so she relaxed. And as she was laying there, something felt off, and she heard a noise at the door, and she watched as the doorknob slowly unlocked itself. When she told me that, my blood went cold. This didn't just happen once. My son was sitting in there, and he heard tapping followed by the door unlocking on him too. The other day, my son said that he had to go to the bathroom around 3 a.m. He knew everyone was all asleep because he heard us all snoring, so he didn't quite shut the door all the way, but it was closed. He heard heavy breathing as if someone had their mouth at the crack of the door. Then he heard a quiet voice whisper, "I can hear you." That poor boy was scared to death. I, for the first time, experienced the doorknob unlocking on me 3 times in a row in my bathroom last night. That surprised me. It's not always been bad experiences here, though. Since my mother passed, I feel her sometimes around me. We all do. Just last month, I was talking to my son in the living room and I saw a light. We don't live near a street, so it wasn't from a car. It was soft and illuminating as it floated from the front window curtain around to the wall behind my son. I got such a warm feeling and said, "Hello, Mama," and watched as it went behind the recliner where my son was sitting, and then up behind his head and disappeared. He didn't see this or know why I said that. Just then, he shrugged his shoulders up and put his hand on the back of his head, saying that it felt like his hair was stroked. That brought tears to us both. We all know when she's here because it feels warm and loving like her, and sometimes we smell her sweet perfume. My grandson, who is autistic, was too young to comprehend my mother's death. He sometimes talks to her, almost like he's answering what seems to be a question. He's only 6 and has the purest soul. I wish I could hear her voice speak to me again. And then you have things happen that at the time you don't understand, but when you find out, everything falls into place. This was one such time. In March, we had a few aluminium balloons left over from my grandson's birthday, and they'd lasted a very long time. All of them fell to the floor except one particular balloon. They kept following me midway in the air around the house. The air conditioner or heater was on, and all the windows were shut. I went to my bedroom and it followed and stayed by my bed. I went into the laundry room and it followed there as well. This went on for a solid week. After a while, it started getting annoying, but we didn't think anything of it. We just swatted it away. One day, my son and I were talking in the kitchen, and it came in from the living room where we just saw it laying on the floor moments before, and lowered itself to go under the doorframe and stopped mid-height between us. He took it and pushed it back in the living room. Not even 4 minutes later, and it was back mid-height between us. This time, he put it all the way in the laundry room and it made its way back, lowering to come through this time 2 door frames, and stayed floating midway between us again. At that point, it was too weird. We both looked at each other and said, "Nah." So I took it and said, okay, if this is you, Mom, do it again. I put it back in the living room and it stayed there floating. It didn't feel like her at that moment. It felt different, almost familiar, but not in a bad way. We went back to talking and there it was again between us. Well, I didn't know this at the time. In fact, I just found out a few weeks ago that my dear friend passed away in March and his family didn't have my number to tell me. One of the last things he told me was that when he dies, he's going to come harass me just for fun and to let me know he's here and he loves me. When I found out, I called out to my son saying, "It was Tom. It was Tom." After I told him the sad news, he said that it gave him a bit of peace. We all knew that this was something he would do, and it blew our minds. I just wish I found out then so I could have told him that I love him too. 3 nights ago, I saw a light low to the ground in the kitchen, and 5 minutes later, my granddaughter saw the same light formed like a feather, fluttering in front of her. My son also told me that a light trailed up over and across in his room. Another time he walked into my room and saw a light above my head. My neighbour is confident something happened on this land. I talked to him to see if he had been having experiences or seeing anything unusual without making myself look crazy. He said that he doesn't go out after dark, but he has heard the screams in the forest and his pets acting strangely from time to time. As we were talking, his roommate came home and asked what we were talking about. When I told him, he pointed to the young man I was talking to first and said, "You see, I'm not nuts." Apparently, he has seen things as well and calls what he sees in his bedroom a demon boy because he doesn't know what it is. He even saged his room, and if you think about it, that goes along with the orb that danced with my granddaughter when we first moved in. And no, it's not a demon. I think that perhaps a child is in some way connected to the property, and it might roam. We've seen so many beautiful things here that it outweighs the bad. Someday, after I'm gone, I hope to be a part of that. I want to be the whisper of encouragement in my loved one's ear and a gentle stroke upon their face. I want them to always know that they don't have to be afraid and that they are and always will be loved from now until forever. As for what is here in this house, I think since I've been more aware of the darkness, it shows itself less. I do enjoy feeling my loved ones around though, and my kids do too. Someday we'll move from this place and hopefully only our loved ones will follow. So today, when I arrived home after running errands, my ex, the ex-non-believer, told me that without a doubt he saw something. At first, I told him to stop playing around because I thought he was making fun of us. I've known this man for 24 years, so I know when he's serious, he's definitely shaken. He said that he was standing in the guest room and he was about to go into the bathroom to wash his hands, when someone tall who he thought was my son turned on the light and darted into the bathroom really fast, closing the door behind him. He waited for a bit, but didn't hear anything. He got tired of waiting, so he washed his hands in the kitchen. Still not hearing anything for a while, he went to the door and asked if my son was okay. Still no answer, but the light was still on. Finally, he opened the door only to find nothing. Confused, he went to my son's room and knocked on his door to ask him why he did that and left the light on. But when my son came out of his room, he was wearing a burgundy shirt and pants. With a shake in his voice, my ex asked if he changed his clothes, to which my son responded with, "No. Why?" The person my ex saw was wearing a blue t-shirt and shorts. My son told me that when he opened the door, my ex turned pale. My son's fiancée was in the kitchen today, and we were all putting away groceries. She has mid-length hair, and in front of everyone, her hair flipped up like someone tossed it. It freaked her out, and she said it gave her shivers. Sorry, this post keeps getting longer. I promised my other son I would come help paint his new place, so I bathed my grandkids and made them something to eat. I figured I would only be gone for a few hours, but it took longer than expected. When I arrived, there was all kinds of commotion going on in my room, and my grandson was crying uncontrollably. Nobody could understand him because he was so upset, so he was trying to act out what had just happened. Sorry if I am rambling, but this was very upsetting. After I calmed him down, he told me that he was getting tired, so he laid down. He said something woke him up, and he heard my car, so he went toward the bedroom door, when a dark hole formed at the top outside my door, and a dark, meaning shadow-type boy, came out of it. He said that the boy stood in the doorway and pushed him back and slammed the baby gate, trapping him in the room. He said it was evil. He kept saying that over and over. He's evil. After the gate shut, my grandson screamed, so everyone in the house ran to see what was wrong with him. I know my kids have active imaginations, but I know him. He's autistic. He doesn't lie or make stuff up like this. He was visibly shaken up, and since last night, his story hasn't changed. This happened in Lancaster, California in 1997. I moved to an apartment with my youngest son and his father, Kev. Things were pretty good, so I thought, until they weren't. Kev started drinking again and hanging out with his brothers and some friends. He stayed out for days at a time and would sometimes come home accusing me of cheating. Life sucked. I'd been paying on storage for years. It held all the memories of my family and my other children from a time we once had together. It was very important to me. My car had been stolen prior to moving in, so I had to depend on Kev and his family to take my money and pay the bills. The last few months before I left him, he was acting erratic, more than usual. He started using drugs and it became a way of life with him. One night, I was making dinner and I heard something outside. My name was being called. I looked out the living room window and to my surprise, our quiet street was bustling with commotion. Red and blue flashing lights filled the night, and there he stood in the middle of this, yelling my name. Then an officer came to my door before I could even run out there. He said, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you want to come out and claim your car? If you don't, it'll be towed." What the hell is he talking about? Apparently, his brother took my car and was keeping it at his mother's house for Kev, And now Kev is outside telling the sheriffs that it's my car, so the drugs they found in it were mine. Really? Well, the officer believed me, and he was sent back to prison. So there I sat, alone and in shock, but let's add insult to injury here. The landlord showed up days later, telling me that I haven't paid rent in 4 months, and I haven't responded to letters I never received, so I was out in 10 days. This wasn't even enough time to move my stuff. The utilities got shut off soon after that. Then I found out that he took every cent I put away. My world was upside down, and I felt crushed. I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't move to my mother's because, well, it was complicated. Plus, I had prior commitments in Lancaster. I temporarily moved my son and I in with a friend. I needed time to heal from this. I soon found out she was selling drugs. At first we were fine. We kept to ourselves and away from that lifestyle, but my depression kicked in, and the temptation to make the pain go away was too strong. I called my mother and asked her to come get my son. I didn't want him to be around that stuff, and she did. I didn't want any of my kids to see me like that. I was a mess. My self-esteem was the lowest it had ever been. How could I have been such a fool? Every time I drove by my boarded-up apartment with my belongings in there, it was a constant reminder. One day, my friend went and picked up my mail from that place, and there it was, the nail in my coffin. He stopped paying my storage, and it was up for auction for way too much money. That was it. Now I've lost the last thing I was holding on to. Something just flipped in my mind. I was told that I dropped the letter and walked out of the house in my bare feet, wearing just a long t-shirt in the freezing weather. I walked over to the mini-mart and made a big cup of cocoa and walked out without paying. My friend saw me and paid, later finding me sitting in the park just staring at nothing. Man, I was in a bad place. I couldn't bring myself to call my children or my mother and tell them that everything the kids had from childhood was gone. Now this is what I'm not proud of. I felt in my sick head that my children were better off without me. I told my friends that I was off to see my family, and I parked my car 2 blocks away in an alley. I broke into my old apartment with the boarded up windows, went into the back so nobody would notice, and I sat down on my couch. The room was lit by only one candle with a book in front of it, so it cast no shadows, and I wrote a farewell letter to my family. First to my children, each and every one of them, telling them how they should be there for each other, not to be like me, to do great things with their lives. Then a letter to my mother, telling her what a wonderful job she did raising me, and how sorry I was for falling short and hurting her so many times. On every page, the ink was bleeding where the wrinkled pages were soiled by my tears. I had a handful of pills enough to kill a horse. I put them in my mouth and waited. The room was dark and cold. There was nothing left in me. This was it. My stomach felt like it was burning and my eyes started to get heavy. I was alone. I started to fade out and then jolted awake. I looked around and my eyes began to focus. There were people in the room with me, walking back and forth in front of me and behind me, like they didn't know I was there. There was no colour in the room. I reached out my arm in front of me, trying to touch them, but I was just waving my hand through the air. Just then, this lady stopped. She stood there, still facing the direction she was walking. I believed I muttered, "What are you?" At least that's what I heard come from my mouth. She turned her head and looked straight at me and screamed a blood-curdling scream that went back to walking. At this point, my body is still sitting up, but slumped into the couch. It felt like my eyes were rolling into the back of my head, and I got nudged on my chest near my shoulder. "Wake up," he said. He was stern. "It isn't your time." He was wearing a trench coat and everything was grey. My head fell back down and he nudged me again, only harder. "It's not your time," he repeated himself, then a hard slap to my face. It felt like cold air on my neck. There were then hands on both my shoulders, shaking me, flopping my head side to side, and I passed out at that point. I woke up to fingers down my throat and me gasping for air. It was a girl I only met twice. She said she got a feeling I was there and I needed help. She said that she couldn't shake it for hours and that she had never felt anything like that before, so she didn't understand why she was there. She told her friend she needed to break in the door. He was so scared to get in trouble, but he said when he got there, he felt the same thing she was feeling. I will forever be grateful to her for saving me, and to the man for trying to shake me awake until help arrived. And life got better after that. I worked things out in my head. I got away from that life and those people. I learned that you can't do it alone, but we can do it together. I tried to solve a temporary problem with a permanent solution. I found the letters I wrote years later, and it filled me with shame. The mental problems that would have caused my family. What a selfish act. If anyone out there is suffering and feel like there's no way out, there is. Believe me. Stop pushing your loved ones away. They may not understand what you're going through, but they can listen. And if you still feel nobody hears you, please get help. Only time reveals the answers. I was going through a very nasty battle with the father of 3 of my children. I believe children should know both parents and have a positive relationship with them, but this man was evil. We were all scared for our lives, including my mother, and I had to place my children where they would be safe. My mother and sister agreed to take care of my 5 children at the time, until that mess was all over. I made a promise to my girls that they would never have to see that man again. He was a stalker, and he had ways of finding people. He wanted revenge for us breaking from him and running away. We found a small brick triplex townhouse apartment with 4 small garages lining the driveway, with a partially enclosed courtyard with a separate 2-story house in the front. It was a small Spanish community in Santa Paula off 8th Street. The place was not very big, but neither were the kids. The landlord understood their desperation and she let them move in. The downstairs consisted of a living room, bathroom, and a kitchen with an open cubbyhole under the stairs. But the living room was only 10 feet wide, if that, but it was long. The stairs were located in the back of the house by the door to the backyard. At the top of the stairs, you met with a bathroom, next to that a very small bedroom. To the left of the stairs in front of the house was a long bedroom. Nothing happened at first. It was a nice relief from the turmoil they had just endured, but things started to change. At first, the kids all slept on mattresses in the small room together next to their baby sister's crib, but they didn't like it in there. The baby would stand there in her crib and scream like something was scaring her. The kids started to wet the bed because they were too scared to go walk through the doorway. Night after night this went on until my mother had enough. She moved all the children into the big room with her, and the baby no longer slept in her crib. My youngest boy at the time, however, didn't want to sleep upstairs at all. We had a couch and love seat, so my sister slept downstairs with him. It was in that house he stopped talking and his diet changed for years to come. He would stand, point and grunt at the open space under the stairs, so my sister had to cover it up with a blanket. The laundry room was located outside behind the garages, so one time when I was there, we were all playing a board game. My sister asked my oldest boy to leave the game and go with her to do a load of laundry. I asked her why he had to go and why the walkie-talkie. She said it was because she was scared. It felt like someone was watching her the whole time she was in there, so I got up and went with her. I felt it too. I came to visit often, always changing my routine, so I knew I wasn't being followed, and every time the tears would flow when I had to go. We would take walks through the neighborhood and dream about us living in one of those big, beautiful houses. Then the kids would ask me if I thought any of them were haunted. I felt like a few of them were. Not because they were old or scary, it just felt like they were. It's also a very old town. It's seen its share of deaths. Each time I came over, they told me about their new friends next door, but they never mentioned the boy in the front house. I saw him in the window upstairs a few times. I even told my mother I thought it was very strange we never saw him outside. I asked the next door neighbour about him, but she said that she had never seen any other children. Just an old lady whose husband died years before. I remember seeing the boy in the upstairs window 3 days after the old lady passed away. It was the only light on in the house. A week later, the landlord told my mother that there were lots of things left behind in the basement that no one claimed that she thought my mother could use for herself and the kids. The basement doors were located outside like a double-door storm shelter next to the house. The landlord opened the doors one at a time, revealing stone steps that went down into the darkness. I took a flashlight and went while my mother waited. I saw old furniture in a crib, toys and boys' clothes in boxes, then a picture. It was unmistakable. It was that little boy. I felt a deep sadness and distress along with so much commotion. Then the walls looked like they were closing in on me, like we weren't supposed to be there touching that stuff. I ran back up the stairs and told my mother, no. We would not be taking anything from down there. Even if there were things we could use, it just didn't feel right. I asked the landlord what happened to the boy now that the old lady died, thinking it was her grandson. She said that there was no boy. Their son died many years ago. He was playing with his dad's gun he found in the basement, and that's where he shot himself. He was an only child. That gave us both the chills. My daughter Penny kept telling me, along with my other kids, all the strange and scary things they were experiencing and about whatever it was upstairs in the hall outside the bedrooms. You always felt uneasy up there. One day, my daughter Ginny was up there. I went into the room to see what she was doing. It was too quiet. She was drawing all over my mother's big stand-up suitcase. When I confronted her, she calmly turned her head to look at me, but it seemed like she wasn't there. I yelled out her name and she looked surprised, puzzled as to what she had just done. She dropped the marker and cried, "What's happening? It wasn't me. I didn't do it." I saw a figure there in the hall many times, most of the time in the bedroom doorway watching us sleep. But there was nothing we could do about it. It wouldn't go away. It wasn't until there was enough money made for them to move. Mom thought that there was a lot of activity because of where it was located. It was near an old train stop and firehouse. You could just feel the history in that place. There had also been quite a number of territory wars there, and a lot of young lives were lost. I was talking to my eldest daughter Penny just the other day, and I told her that I was thinking about writing these experiences down. We both described the same dark figure that wore a hat and would stand in the doorway of the hall, just watching almost every night. Soon after, they were able to move to a mobile home in Oxnard. There had been many times in my life where I had felt like it was my own personal responsibility to be the voice for those too scared or unable to speak out, whether it be someone being abused or a person being tormented by something unseen. I believe that I passed that on to some of my children to stand up for someone who can't. That being said, I would like to share with you one of these such times with something unseen. I met my friend at a self-help meeting in 2006. She exudes class, and I was just a little happy-go-lucky me. We became very close friends despite us both coming from completely different walks of life. Something just clicked. We were there for each other no matter what. Well, things happened in her life that took her to Kansas with her kids. And although I was heartbroken to see her go, I knew it was what she needed at the time. I came out to see her on several occasions, sometimes life events, and other times just because we missed each other's hugs. But every time I went, I felt uneasy in her home. There was just something I couldn't put my finger on that unsettled me. It was a ranch-style 2-story house, built in the 70s with bricks ribboning around the house halfway up the wall, with shutters on all the windows. The entrance to the house has a big, beautiful wood door with a framed, etched panel. As you open the door, you're met with stairs that lead straight up to the second landing. To the right was the living room, and to the left a sitting room, a dining room, kitchen, and den. The first time I went there, I kept seeing something on the landing at the top of the stairs, but only for a moment, but upon second glance, it was gone. One time I saw what looked like a dark figure. I thought it was her small daughter coming down slowly, one step at a time, then disappearing almost at the bottom. Sometimes before entering the house, I would think someone was standing on the other side of the door, because I saw a shadow step up through the etched glass panel. I thought one day I would surprise her by doing something special in her garden in the front. But when I saw that, I just waited outside until she got home from work and didn't tell her. At night, I would start up the stairs, then run real fast to my room. I'm not young, so it may have looked funny. I stayed in a bedroom in the front of the house with all the windows. To me, it seemed a little dark, even though there was natural light. The room was big and the door was all the way across the room that led to the hall. Another room and a bathroom. Christie's room was on the other side. I kept waking up with chills, bounding myself with more blankets, but thought nothing of it. I brought up the shadows to Christie, but she said, "Shut up, don't freak me out in my new house." And with that, I left it alone. I tried to put it in the back of my mind and tell myself it was nothing. I went to her home a few more times, and every time the same thing. Weird dreams, waking up by loud noises in my ear and still seeing shadows. Also adding my name being called when no one was home. I said nothing to Christie except, "Are you sure it's nothing?" She said that she had seen things here and there, but what was worse was her daughter was having terrifying dreams, waking her up at all hours of the night. You know, she could just be having bad dreams, but I'll never discredit the fact that it may be something else, having experienced things myself as a child. The last time I went there, the mood was light. It had just snowed and I had been moved to the smaller room upstairs. Her daughter Lily took over the big room. It seemed like every other night, Lily would have bad dreams calling out for her mother. One night, she went to bed and I followed shortly after. I felt off for some reason. I remember putting 3 nightlights in my room that night. I tossed and turned, but it felt as if something was watching my back. It gave me cold shivers down my spine. I finally fell asleep and had twisted dreams of 2 people. A man and a woman with dark hair that was up almost to a point on top of her head. The only way to describe his hair, as it was short and shiny and went up as well. At one point, he nodded his head side to side real fast and leaned over me, pressing his hand on my shoulder, and screamed in my ear to wake up. I opened my eyes and saw swirls around the room, along with the image of their 2 faces, so I sat up and they dissipated. I could hear Lily start to moan, so I cautiously went to her door and drew an invisible line of protection in the doorway and said a prayer. I went back to my room because it was still dark outside and I didn't want to wake anyone by roaming around. I laid back down and fell asleep, only to be awakened by talking in the hall. I didn't recognize their voices or what they were quietly saying, but it felt like I was being mocked. I saw them standing in Lily's doorway, looking at her, whispering and looking back towards my room. Lily then screamed so quickly, faded away, before Christie turned the corner to console Lily. When Christie woke up, I didn't want to freak her out, but I felt I needed to share some of this with her. I described the images of the man and woman I saw with her, but I don't know if she believed me. Later, Lily came downstairs saying she once again had bad dreams, so I asked her to draw a picture of the people she saw in the dream. She drew the same people I had just described to Christie. Nothing more was said because we didn't want to scare Lily, and I think at the same time, talking about it made Christie uncomfortable. That weekend, we went to the store to do a little bit of food shopping to last me until I headed home. I purchased 2 big containers of salt, and when she questioned me about it, I told her that I just needed them. Maybe I wanted to boil peanuts or something. Monday came, Christie went to work, and Lily was in school. This was my chance. I was planning my attack on cleansing this house, and while I was doing that, I was getting angry. Angry at whatever this was. Scaring a child and infiltrating the safety and peace of my best friend's home. I must have looked like a crazy person. I cleansed every crack and crevice of every room, going as far as getting on the counters, putting salt in the corners of all the cabinets while yelling out, demanding whatever it was to leave, and damning them for daring to even bring fear to a child in the first place. Like I said, I looked crazy. I didn't cleanse the basement because silly me was too scared to go down there, so I salted and used sage around the closed door. I didn't say anything to Christy about what I had just done, and I felt good about it. It was quite some time later, after I was home, we were talking. She said that Lily's dreams weren't so terrifying, and things felt pretty good. She told me that she knew what I did. My reply was, "Whatever do you mean?" Thinking in the back of my head, somehow she had a camera set up, and she thinks I'm nuts. She said, "I found the salt."